Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fabricio with Deb podcast. Guys, I'm here going to talk about the Dricus and Strickland fight. Unfortunately, Sam could not be with us today. I'm going to try and run through some of these stats. Probably won't do it as good as him, but hey, I can give it a shot. I'm going to talk a little bit about it. Then I'm going to try and maybe answer some of the questions that people have written. But let's kick off with no further delays. Just give me 1 second as I get this up. Okay. There we go. I like the fight. I felt that Sean might have pulled it away. Might have pulled away right at the, just in general. But hey, let's go with this. This first one here that I'm going to talk about. All right. I'm going to take my face off so you can see all the things really clearly. And we're off. So overall for the entire fight, Strickland landed 173 significant strikes, 26% more than DDP did, with only 137 strikes. So overall, 173 significant strikes for Strickland, 137 for DDP. Overall, Strickland landed almost double the number of head strikes, 157, and DDP only landed 81. This is also somewhat of a product of the differences in their strategies, with Strickland attempting more head strikes and DDP also throwing more strikes to the body and the legs. DDP landed 32 strikes to the body and 24 leg strikes compared to Strickland's 10 and 6 respectively. Overall, DDP was credited with 6 takedowns and 128 seconds of control time, although some of that control time was also in the clinch. Again, you have to, when I'm saying all of this, I'm going to come back and talk more about the fight specifically, like looking at it as a fight entirely. I'm just going to read out some of the stats to you and go through some of the stats. Strickland lands 34 significant strikes to DDP's 18. 28 of these are head strikes compared to DDP's 8. So Strickland landed more than 3 times as many head strikes. DDP is credited with 2 takedowns and 28 seconds of control time. So this is in round 1 specifically, right? So this round was a round I give clearly to Strickland. Okay, so that's round 1. I give that clearly to Strickland. Round 2, which I think was one of the swing rounds, really was the swing round in my opinion. But having said that, it wasn't the round that the judges were stuck on, to be fair. So let's have a look at round 2. Round 2, DDP outstrikes Strickland in round 2, but only by 4 significant strikes, landing with 8% higher accuracy. DDP is also credited with 1 takedown. However, Strickland does land almost double the number of head strikes, with DDP only landing 11. That's probably why I thought Strickland had won that round. Not by much, but it was definitely a swing round. So that one could have gone either way. Although me personally felt it was to Strickland. Then moving right along, we have round 3. Round 3 is very close, with Strickland landing only 2 more significant strikes than DDP. DDP didn't score any takedowns in round 3. Strickland lands over twice as many head strikes than DDP, with 29 compared to DDP's 13. DDP does land 8 more strikes to the body than Strickland and a further 6 leg strikes. So it goes down to what you thought was more effective, what you thought was things. It's very subjective. So I think both those rounds could serve as swing rounds, in my opinion. Moving right along. So now we at round 4. Round 4 to me was clearly DDP's. Watching the fight live, I gave round 4 to DDP easily, and while I still agree with it, it's not as clear as I originally thought when looking at the stats. Strickland did land 4 more significant strikes than DDP. Strickland lands 50% more head strikes than DDP landed, 32. DDP is credited with three takedowns and 78 seconds of control time. I will say this, though. You have to kind of go with what you see live. You can't go with I'll come back to that in a second. Round 5. Now we're talking about round 5 here, which I think Strickland won. Round 5, Strickland increases his work rate and accuracy, landing 53 significant strikes compared to DDP's 35. Strickland lands 48 head strikes, 21 more than DDP's 27. DDP is not credited with any takedowns. And I'm going to talk about a couple of other things. So that's the fight quickly, you know what I mean? And I'm giving you this, then we can talk about the fight in general. I'm just giving you the stats, all right? I'm just giving you the stats. So average landed by target and accuracy by target. Strickland increased his first round head strikes by 40%. His second round was slightly lower than his average. The third round saw Strickland increase over his average by 32%. His fourth round saw an increase in the number of strikes landed and matching his historical fourth round average. The fifth round saw a further increase in head strikes and a 37% increase on his historical fifth rounds. Strickland had higher than average head accuracy for his first and fifth rounds. The middle 3 rounds, Strickland had slightly lower head accuracy than his historical trends. So he actually fought better in the first and fifth than he has in previous fights. This is very telling and very important. Now we're going to talk about Plessis and what these stats mean as far as Plessis is concerned. DDP attempted more head strikes than he normally does for the first 3 rounds, but he landed much less than he normally does, showing a decrease in accuracy, also demonstrating Strickland's defense. Also landed slightly more leg and body strikes than his UFC average. And I will talk about this further when we discuss the fight in general, but the way that DDP threw his shots, when you're watching it live, even though you look at the stats and when you look at it the second time, he doesn't land them as clean. But when you're watching a fight live, the fact that he's throwing with heat and the way that he's throwing makes you cringe, makes you think, oh, he's going to land this. And so that counts for something when you're watching a fight live. Okay. The chart on the left shows a significant lack of accuracy in DDP's first 3 rounds compared to his UFC averages. He only landed about 20 to 26% in head strikes for the first 3 rounds. The chart on the right demonstrates how Strickland was able to keep the fight standing. DDP usually throws several ground strikes each round. In this fight, DDP was only able to throw 1 ground strike in round 4. He did attempt much more strikes while standing than he normally does for the first 3 rounds, but he just could not connect. Now I'm just going to discuss the fight in general. We spoke about, they're the stats, you know, so I have something to talk to rather than just me saying, this is what I think. But there is an element of truth to that. There is an element when you're watching a fight, who do you think won the fight? You know, and that's a big one. I in a nutshell, I'm going to say this. I feel you have to watch a fight live and you have to score it live, right? You can't use revisionist history because things that are happening in the fight when you don't know what the result's going to be is different to watching someone do something not knowing what the result's going to be. So if you're watching someone attempt a takedown, but I already know he doesn't get it, then I just think he's not going to get it. But if you're looking at this fight, the guy's a fantastic jiu-jitsu world champion and he's trying to take somebody down, there is an element of fear. There is an element of whether or not he's going to be able to impose his game on this person. Then this person has to defend that takedown and, you know, could leave himself open for strikes. So there's these elements that you're watching. So fights got to be watched live and they've got to be judged live because you're going off what is happening, not off what you already know is going to happen. That revisionist history it doesn't work. For example, one of the big things when I rewatched the fight with Plessis, I thought Strickland won just, but when I watched the fight live, you can see my reactions, you know, when I'm watching the fight live. When I'm watching the fight live, I'm watching the shots and I'm thinking, oh, they're so close. They're so close. And especially the way that Sean has that Philly shell and he moves his head out of the way and he's kind of scooting back. But then when you watch it like later, you see these shots don't land. Most of these shots didn't land properly. And you see it statistically, they didn't land. But in the fight, the impact that him swinging with such bad intentions had on the fight was moving Sean backwards, was making you think that he was probably going to knock Sean out. And so that matters. You know, having said that, I feel that Sean won that fight because I struggle to see how you can give. Even the fourth round, Sean had moments in that fourth round, but let's concede that Duplessis took the fourth round for sure, 100%, and that Sean took the fifth and the first. I don't feel comfortable taking the belt off a champion with only one clear round that he lost. Because then the second and third, you have to go, well, let's say they're both swing rounds. Do you give them both to Duplessis? Do you give them both to Sean? I wouldn't feel comfortable saying, yeah, let's give both those swing rounds to Sean, and Sean won 4 rounds to 1. That's a bit of a stretch as well. I feel one of those rounds would have gone to one of them, then the other one could have gone to the other one, depending on how you view the criteria, how you see it, et cetera, et cetera. So I can't see me giving second, third, and fourth to Duplessis. I just didn't think he did that kind of work. I thought it was close. It was very close, but Sean only had to win like one of those rounds in the middle because the first and the fifth he very clearly won. So that's my take on it. Jordan Martinez says, will Strickland always have problems beating power punchers like Jared Andrikis over 5 rounds because their punches are more damaging than Sean's accumulative striking? I disagree. I don't see that. I don't see that any one of those guys really damaged Sean. I don't. If you look at Sean and you look at Duplessis, Sean damaged him, man. Like really damaged him. The thing is, the way that Duplessis punches and the way that he comes forward, when you're watching it live, like he's throwing heavy leather, and if he lands, he'll knock you out, man. He'll hurt you. So a lot of that is the anticipation as you're watching something live. So I don't think so. I think there's like there's a how could I say, there's a subjectivity to judging. I disagree with the judge's decision, but I don't think they were wrong. It just depends on how you see the criteria. You know what I mean? I saw it as pretty clearly to me that Strickland won. But I can understand it's not like there is no case for the second, third, and fourth going to Duplessis. There is a case, but I don't know how you would have to be heavily in favor of what you're watching. I don't know. You'd have to have a bias. I'm not saying they have a bias for Duplessis. I'm saying you'd have to have a bias for that fighting style, perhaps, where you're watching it going, this is more effective because he wasn't landing the shots. So I don't think he has a problem with the power punches. You know what I mean? Necessarily. I think people sometimes are watching it going, and so some Jordan, somebody else asked something about the cut. Oh, Max Jamil says, thoughts on Sean's post-fight comment saying the headbutt changes the fight. I think the cuts definitely changed the fight. Whether it was off the elbow, off the headbutt, it doesn't matter really because it's not like they took a point off or something. So the cut definitely changed the mechanics of the fight, like as in like one, the visuals. So the referees, the judges, the other coaches, the fighters, everyone, the crowd, he's seeing Sean bleed. So that's a big one. That's huge. And the second one is it actually really hard to see. If you've ever been cut, if you've ever had a cut and the blood goes into your eyes, you cannot see. This is like actual real, you cannot see. It really impacts your ability to see more than you would think. It's not even like, if you get water in your eyes, you're like, you can't see, but the blood, you actually can't see. You really, really can't see. Jordan Martinez says, have you seen the Weasels video on the fight? He did who really won and broke down the fight strike by strike and judged it based on the scoring criteria. I think I haven't seen it, but I have seen the Weasel's other stuff. And shout out to the Weasel. I think he does a fantastic job. And I think he does a good job of bringing the fight and explaining what happened. I think this is an important thing. But again, like I say, it's one thing to judge a fight live using the scoring criteria. And even then, the scoring criteria is subject to your bias, you know what I mean? Like it's subjective, so it's not going to be just because you followed that criteria thing. There's a whole law profession made on that, you know what I mean? The law is pretty like, this is what it is, but people can argue it around it, So they, even if you use the criteria, you're still going to have different opinions on it. That's number one. Number two is when you judge a fight after the fight happened, it's not the same. It's revisionist history, because now that when, for example, I'm just saying this, when Dricka swings a punch, that it didn't land, and not only didn't land, but the next one didn't land, and the next rounds didn't land. So you can't get that thing out of your head. You're watching it live with already knowing the result. And if it's a second time that you're watching it, again, you're watching it differently. You're picking up different stuff. You're understanding how people are setting stuff up that you might not be privy to in the fight, So, no, whilst I haven't, I'm sure it was fantastic, and it's great. It's a really great watch in general, I think, about the Weasel. And I think he does a fantastic job of explaining it. I'm just saying that when you're watching these things, it's not always how the fights are meant to be watched anyways. You're meant to watch these live. Thruhouse says, hello, Fabricio. Respect, my man. Hope you and your family are well. Thank you, sir. Likewise for you as well. Same as you watch some of the boxing fights and like the anticipation between two guys fighting. I can't remember who these guys were. One of the boys, Harry, actually told me to watch their fights, and I did. Might have been Charlo. I'm not sure. I can't remember who it was. But anyways, it was two boxers, and the anticipation for the matchup was really, really good. But in the actual fight, he just couldn't get, one of them just couldn't get the other guy's respect, He just could not get his respect. So he had skills, he had everything, and the other guy just walked through him. And because I already knew the result, when I was watching it, I was like, this guy is just not just can't do it. Of course he can't do it. And the way I saw him was completely different than had I watched it live. If I'd have watched it live and watched that fight evolve and watched the two fighters, one, learn that he didn't have to respect the punches, and two, the other guy not be able to adjust, the way I might have scored that would be completely different. Like I basically didn't give this other guy any rounds because I already knew that his style wasn't going to be effective. SG says, greetings, Fabs. Might have been one of the closest title fights in recent history. Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of close title fights. I thought this was close. But like John Jones has had close fights where he's gotten the nod, right? And I felt that this wasn't as close, where I feel like Strickland deserves an immediate rematch, in my opinion. But the way I feel about this fight is Strickland should have got the nod, and because it was so close, Du Plessis should get the rematch. That's how I feel about this fight. I think Du Plessis did a fantastic job, and he deserves to be the champion, as in, like, I can't say, nah, that's fucking horrible, but I didn't think it was that close, to be honest with you. I thought it was close in as far as, like, that was a close fight, but I can't see how, if a champion wins 2 rounds clearly in a 5-round fight, you win 1 round. It wasn't as clear, when you look at the stats and that and everything, but okay, live, you give that one to Du Plessis. Then there's 2 rounds in the middle. Like, you give both to Du Plessis, I think that's a bit of a stretch. That's just how I think. That was a great fight. SG says, how would one score damage in this fight? Both guys looked hurt and Strickland outstruck him. I think damage is a subjective term as well. Like, damage is very hard to score. That's what people go, these punches were more damaging. You don't even know that. Like, liver shots are damaging, and you don't see, like, you could get hit with a liver shot in the first round, but the damage doesn't resurface till 4th or 5th round, when you start to really gas, and you don't, like, the people that are watching don't understand why the fighter's gassing in the 5th round, but he got hit with 2-3 shots to the body in the first round that really started to wear on him later in the fight. So I think that Strickland outstruck him, and even when people are talking about damage, like, Strickland had some cuts, right? When people are talking about that landed the heavier shots, like, I felt Strickland shoulder rolled a lot of them. I felt that if Du Plessis had landed some of the shots that he threw flush, he would have knocked Strickland out, especially early on. So, and then people are talking about the damage, but Du Plessis looks like he got put through a meat grinder, and Strickland's got a couple of cuts and things, but you can't even gauge that. You can't even say, oh, that wasn't that damaging. I've seen Ngannou knock people out, and they're not bruised, they're not banged up, they just got hit in their head and they're out, completely out. And that's damaging. So it's hard. It's very, very hard to say. To me, it is very, very clear statistically, and even watching the fight, that Strickland landed more shots, it's particularly to the head. And if you think that a jab doesn't hurt or a jab's not damaging, one, look at Du Plessis' face. Two, go down to a local boxing gym and have a dude jab you in the face, and you'll see, like, it messes you up. B. Johnson says, also scored round 2 for Strickland. Yeah, when I was watching the fight, I thought round 2 was pretty clearly to Strickland. I don't know how, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how you saw it a different way. And then if both rounds 2 and 3 to Du Plessis, I think is a bit of a stretch, but that's me. Brad Galea says the middleweight division is blown wide open again. Imagine in a year when Hamzat and Bo are a couple of fights deeper as well. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. You also got like you got Rob and Costa fighting. That's going to be an interesting fight. I don't see any way for Costa to get past Rob outside of just lucky catching him. I don't see it. So I dare say Rob would win that fight, but there's Hamza. I think Imavov gets past Stolitze. I think he should do that. Then there's him. Then there's Brendan Allen. He's going to be in the mix as well, depending on how his fights go. I think there's Imavov, Aliskarov. I think there's a guy to watch in Kazriov. Bo Nickel, of course. Usman is in there somewhere as well. I don't know where, but he's in there. You got Israel. Obviously, you got Strickland. Obviously, you got Du Plessis. So yeah, there's some, you know what I mean? There's some interesting matchups that are going to happen, and I think there's always the possibilities of just someone else in there. You know who's another guy? I think that it's 2 guys. I think Gregory Rodriguez, he gets hit and he gets a hit and dropped and knocked out a little bit more than you'd like, but he's still a guy that could beat any single person on any single night. Like, he's a hard-hitting guy with very, very high-level grappling skills. He's a big problem for anyone on a given night. I just don't know that he can get through enough fights without, getting knocked out. There's the Uzbek, what's his name? Nurslan, the guy that beat Bruno Ferreira, and Bruno Ferreira himself. I think these are some guys that you have that could create bigger. Let me see here. I'll just get his name right. So I think Bruno's a problem as well for a lot of people. I don't think he's a hard-hitting guy with very good judo, man. Very good judo, very good grappling. He's 31 years old. He's had a lot of fights. He's 11 wins, 1 loss. His loss is to Nursultan Ruziboev. So I'll just call him Nursultan. Nursultan is a very, very accomplished fighter, and he's very tall for the division, hits very hard, and he's a very good grappler. So I think he'll be a big problem for a lot of people in that division. So there's a couple of guys there. The other guy that I think is a dark horse in that division is Caio Borralho. So there's a lot of guys in that division that might not necessarily be the guys that you have your eyes on right this second. But I think Caio Borralho, Nursultan, Bruno Ferreira, Gregory Rodriguez, these are guys that at the very least can beat anyone on any given night. Ikram Aliskarov is another guy in that category, although I think Aliskarov is definitely of a pretty high caliber. Like he's a kind of guy that with the right kind of matchups can go all the way. He's a big problem. Of course you have Bo Nickel. Of course you have Hamzat. So interesting, very interesting. SG says DDP's pressure was incredible. He never got discouraged with Sean's jabs and would push right through him. Reminded me of Drew Dober's KO against Bobby Green. Yeah, to a certain extent, but there were many times where the jab stopped him in his tracks. There were many, many times. I think his heart was incredible because he did how could I say, he got stopped and then he kept going. But there were many times that the jabs stopped him. You know what I mean? Like it just kind of froze him up a little bit. Oliver Ekman says, "Let's go, Fab. Let's go, Oliver Ekman, my brother. How are you?" SG says, "Could the fight have come down to forward pressure? It looks like the judges favored takedowns that night. Arnold Allen may have lost simply due to some weak takedowns." I'm going to push back a little bit on this. I've heard people say that, but Arnold Allen's fight, and I'm not going to get into who I think won or whatever, it doesn't matter. But the takedowns from Evloev in that fight versus the takedowns from Duplessis in that fight, and the way that Evloev controlled Allen when he did wrestle him was completely different, man. Like Evloev, the times was throwing Allen around. Allen was Granby rolling, and Evloev was staying on top of him, and it was quite significantly, like big significant difference in their grappling. Whereas when Duplessis got Sean down, like he never actually even flattened him out. He never. There was at one stage Sean hit a switch and got back to his feet. Like it wasn't the same type of grappling. I watched both those fights live, and I like Arnold Allen. I kept calling him Brendan Allen. It was different. It was very different. Like it wasn't the same kind of fight. It wasn't the same kind of wrestling and grappling. Like when Evloev wrestled him, he wrestled him and he got him down. And you can say it was ineffective. He didn't. That I'm not debating that or arguing that. I'm just saying that the actual writing of the wrestling was completely different. Duplessis did not wrestle Strickland like that. He got Strickland down and Strickland got back up. It wasn't like Strickland was doing Granby rolls and like trying to do like different escapes and the other guy just floated him. You know what I mean? No, it's not what happened. Can I congratulate Oliver Ekman for his second stripe in jiu-jitsu? He doesn't train with me. He trains out of Iowa, but I know that he got his second stripe. So I just want to say congratulations, Oliver Ekman. It's not easy, mate. He wrestled in high school. Now he got his belt. That's a different thing. That's just one of the guys that's always on the chat. He's a champion. So yeah, I don't necessarily think that you can draw the same parallels between the Arnold Allen fight and the Strickland and Duplessis fights. However, I do think that Arnold Allen had some really good moments, and there can be debate around that maybe, but it was different. Luis Enrique says, "I scored it for Sean, more significant and cleaner strikes, but I will rewatch the fight at least once just to make sure because Dricus hit him hard kicks on the body and legs, which we overlook sometimes." Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say as well when you rewatch the fight because you're not watching it with the same. If you're watching NBA finals and you know that the guy, if you watch it from 1997 and you know that the Bulls won, you're just watching everything that the Phoenix Suns did. I don't know if you watch, I think it was 1995. You're watching the Phoenix Suns going, Horace Grant's going to block your shot at the last moment, Kevin Johnson. This is all for nothing. So it's different, Anthony B says, "Why do you think Dricus seems to gas out quickly? Muscle in question mark. I actually don't think he gasses out that quickly. I just think he fights at it surprises me how good his gas tank is actually. I'm really, really surprised because the pace at which he fights and how much he pushes forward and how much damage he takes to keep going forward like that. Honestly, I thought in the end of the third round, I thought that was going to be it for him because he took so much shots, man. Another thing that you don't understand if you've never been in there, if someone's jabbing the shit out of you, and you're trying to anticipate when they're going to jab, and there's little imperceptible things that the guy that's jabbing you does, like you'll be here and the guy is just faking that he's going to jab, and you have to react, you have to move. It's imperceptible if you're not the one in there. That fatigues your neural system. That really fatigues you. And then you take a shot, and you can't move forward. You have to reset. And then the guy faints again. And that starts to fatigue you even more. And you take a shot. By the end of the third round, his face looked like he'd had a fight with 10 guys. and he'd pushed so hard. All the spinning shots that he was throwing and hitting air for the most part, big kicks, big things, man, that would fatigue you. But he just kept going fourth and fifth. So I'm actually very impressed with him. I don't know too many people that could push like that for 5 rounds. I really don't think there's many. The guy that I would have thought he'd have a lot of problems with would be a Sean Strickland. And I think he did have a lot of problems with him, and I don't think he beat him. But that's because Sean is so methodical and he can do what he does. But if you're going to meet Dricus in the middle and go like physicality to physicality with him, I don't think you can beat him. I think to beat, unless you catch him with something, unless you like chin him like Roberto Soldic did. If not, you're not going to beat him because he, for some reason, whatever that reason may be, he can just keep fucking going. And he shouldn't be able to keep going like that. You know what I mean? He shouldn't. So it's very, very crazy. B. Johnson says, weirdly enough, I think Sean landed the harder punches than DDP. You know what, Ben? I have to say, I agree. Like the narrative is that DDP landed the heavier punches. But if you understand boxing and you understand, and I'm not a boxer, but I've been around it and that, like he wasn't landing. He did land some shots on Sean, but Sean is moving back and shoulder rolling it. So even when they were landing, they weren't landing flush. He's throwing big and with bad intentions, and it really makes people go, oh shit. But he was not landing them. If he had landed some of those shots, he would have killed him, dude. He would have killed him. And I think that Sean landed some of the cleaner shots, harder shots. And another thing is this: if you land a clean shot, that's a harder shot. You don't have to swing. A big swing is not necessarily going to be cleaner and harder than a nice straight right or a short left hand or a little hook inside or a good little stiff jab. Those shots are hard. Bodybuilding News says DDP has that overhand right hook that looks like he's very open, but he's keeping Sean on the back foot. That is true. And that's these things. But he didn't land that big overhand right. But that big overhand right, when he threw it, when you're watching it live, creates the anticipation, because it does. For me, I was like, fuck, he's going to knock him out. But he didn't. Luis Enriquez says Sean landed the cleaner head strikes for sure, but the huge punches and relentless aggression from Dricus was inevitably going to sway the judges his way. Almost the same story as Strickland versus Canyon. Yeah, like, I don't know if inevitably is the term, because if you look at the criteria, it has to be on damage, and you can't, like, if you're swinging for the fences and controlling the octagon, pushing me back, but I'm actually the one landing, then me landing the shots has to take precedence over you moving me back. Having said that, it's not like Dricus didn't land shots. He did. He absolutely did land shots, and he landed some really hard shots and some really good shots to the legs and the body. Now, if you're going to say to me, I think that the leg and body shots should count as much, if not more, than the jabs, and so hence the difference between the significant strikes is not as great, then I'm listening to that. But as far as like the actual head strikes, if like people are gonna argue that Dricus landed the harder shots, he didn't. He did not land the harder shots. He couldn't have landed the harder shots. If he did, Sean would be dead. But he didn't land them. Now, he did land more leg kicks. He did land more body shots. This is statistically, you can see this. That is a different story. You know what I mean? And if you give those more weight, then okay. You know what I mean? Fair enough. Like I said, I thought Sean won, but I think there is a case for Dricus. I think that's fair. Like, I wouldn't get into an argument as to who won. You know what I mean? Because if you think that Dricus won, there's definitely a case for that. It's not like I felt that Sean did 10-8 on him every round. Bodybuilding News says Sean looked like a point fighter. So Huda and Mighty Mouse said DDP won, and one of his big reasons for that is because the arsenal of Sean is so limited. But that doesn't make sense, because the stuff like that DDP was throwing, whilst it may have been from a greater, like more varied source, it wasn't as effective as the shots that Strickland was landing. And you can see, like in the stats, it's quite significant difference in the amount of strikes that Sean landed. And I'll also disagree with Sean with the point fighting, because Sean's throwing him as well. It's the fact is he sits behind the jab a lot. But if he hits you hard with one of those right hands, he's going to drop you or knock you out. He dropped Israel. Israel's one of the most durable guys to ever have fought. So I do agree that it would help Sean a lot if he had more in his arsenal. I do agree with that. I do. But you can't say, hence, I'll give the fight to Dricus because Dricus has a wide array of weapons, but you can't just throw, like he didn't. If you're going to say he threw spinning back fists and I'm going to give him like points for that, you can't, because if he hit Sean flush with one of those spinning back fists, he would have killed him. Dricus hits really hard. He's a big, strong man, but he wasn't landing those shots. He just was not landing those shots flush. Steve E says, do you feel a shakeup of MMA judging is needed with so many controversial decisions, possibly 5 judges, etc.? Nah, it's not really fair to put it on the judges because, like I'm saying, this fight, there's enough subjectivity between second and third rounds as to how you're going to score it. I'm not saying people are crazy for giving the fight to Dricus. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I saw it this way. But somebody might see it completely different, like what Bodybuilding News said right then. And when I'm looking at it, that I'm not thinking, oh, this guy's an idiot. How could he think that? I don't think that. I just think like, this is how I saw it. This is how he saw it, or Mighty Mouse saw it, or Cejudo saw it, or whatever. So, in a close fight like that, there's going to be subjectivity. It's not like the judges got it wrong, so to speak. There are fights that I'm looking at and I think, like, what the fuck are you watching? I think 5 judges would make it even worse. Like, you think about like presidential elections, you have, if you're in the US, you have like 300 million plus, and 150 million at least are going to think every 4 years that the other side got it wrong. So I don't think that more judges are going to help or whatever. I think maybe a little bit, maybe the criteria could help, or maybe, which you're not going to do. Like, I do think that if you had maybe a longer round, you know what I mean, it might help. I don't know. I think you can't do too much more about it because it's hard. There's a lot of subjectivity. Even if you're watching it with revisionist history, there's a lot of subjectivity as to who won. And you have to accept that. You have to accept that that is one of the things. I think the biggest thing from a fighter's perspective is probably that it affects their pay. And that's a payment issue. And I'm not saying they should get paid more or less or whatever. I'm just saying it's a payment issue. It's not a judging criteria. You know what I mean? It's not a judging thing. The judges are following the criteria. Maybe the criteria can be looked at. I don't think, like, a lot of times it says, oh, ex-fighters or this and that, but it's very different as well. Like, you fighting and you judging are completely different things, and you're still going to have your biases. You're still going to have what you think hurt a fighter or didn't hurt him or whatever, what wouldn't have hurt you or whatever. Like, Mark Hunt could probably watch people and not think that some head strikes hurt because he could walk through them. So it depends, man. I can't say the judges got it wrong. Even though I disagree with the decision, I don't think they got it wrong. I just think that they saw it different to how I saw it. And I also say this, the judges are in different areas and you're watching the fight live. You might have a camera there, but you're still watching the fight live. So how I see a fight from where I'm sitting is not necessarily what the other guy can see, even if you have it on camera. It's not the same thing, dude. It's not the same thing as when you're watching someone get hit like right in front of you, or you're watching it on camera. It's completely different. So I don't think the judges, you can say too much about the judges in this fight, because rounds 2 and 3 were close. And we're looking at it when we saw earlier the stats on it and everything. It was close, but I think Sean won. That's just me. B. Johnson says, outside the cuts on his face, Sean didn't honestly look like he got hit that much, and he wears damage bad on his pale skin. This is very true, Johnson, B. Johnson. It for a guy like white guys, like white dudes, you can see the marks on their face. more clearly than you can on darker people. And this guy didn't, other than the cut, did not have again, that isn't to say that he didn't sustain damage to the body. That isn't to say that he didn't sustain damage to the head, because he might not have bruised, but he could have got, his head wobbled in that. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is you look at Dricus, you look at him, you can't tell me that Sean did not damage Dricus. You can't say that, or you can't look at the two of them at the end of a very close fight and go, I think that Dricus had the more damaging shots. When you look at Dricus's fucking head, and you can tell that that's not true, Even if it was just like, even if Sean landed 3 punches the whole fight, he still damaged Dricus. You can see it. Luis Enrique says, Sean has all the setups thanks to his Swiss Army knife jab. Very versatile. It opens up everything, but he never builds combos off the jab. What other improvements should he work on for a rematch? I'm not going to say that. He's got fantastic coaches. He himself is a very smart, very good fighter. I think he could have probably, the only thing I would say is, he was hiding that front kick really, really well in the first couple of rounds. He did some really good work with that front kick, and he hid the setup to the front kick behind his right hand, so you couldn't really see it. He'd throw the right hand, and as it's coming back, the kick's already coming down the middle, and he hit Du Plessis a fair bit early on in the fight. But this is not a criticism, you should throw the kick more later in the fight, because I don't know what happened in that fight. I don't know if maybe he kicked and his shin might have hit an elbow of Dricus's, and he's thought, all right, I'm not going to do that anymore because I don't want to break my foot. I don't know what he was thinking. So it's very hard for me to say this is what he should do different. But I do think that if he could employ a few more kicks per round in that particular fight, I think would have made a massive difference, because he was having good success with those kicks early on. And it also allows him to play with the distance. Like when he wants to box, he can box. If he doesn't want to box yet, he can kick. And also when you kick with a kicker, it makes the other dude have to do something with his legs other than kick you. Respect to all the fighters for fighting in Toronto. It was minus 15 that night, says SG. That is awful. Minus 15 is too cold. B. Johnson says, bro, you don't get any time to sustain damage against Ngannou. That's true. SG says, Pfeiffer is another top prospect as well. Pfeiffer is another top prospect. He's a very, very good fighter. You know what I mean? Like there's some guys there that are not going to be. There's a lot going to happen in this middleweight division in the next year. You know what I mean? So it's very hard to say, because people say who gets this shot, who gets that shot, but you don't know, because I'm just giving an example. I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, but Ferreira beats he just beat Phil Hawes, right? Let's say in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, he fights fucking the winner of Dalitze and Imavov, and goes out there and smokes the winner, whoever that is. I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, but I'm saying he smokes him, and then puts his hand up for a late notice fight and smokes some other dude, then he's right there as well. And this could change in the next 3 months, 4 months. You know, you don't know. There's guys there that are within, excuse the pun, striking distance. What do you do with Imavov if he beats Dalitze? Because Imavov had a very close fight with Strickland. He lost it, but it was still a close fight on short notice. And he took that. Sean wasn't ready, so Sean fought at light heavyweight, but Imavov had cut down to 185 as well, you know, so that's the company that he keeps, you know what I mean? So it's interesting. B. Johnson says, I forgot about Allen versus Vettori. I really hope Allen does well. That fight, his grappling is a treat to watch. The one problem I see with that fight is that they both kind of got real good chins. Vettori doesn't crack that hard, and he's not that fast with his shots. But he's a better wrestler than Allen. Allen probably has a better jiu-jitsu, but Vettori's a better wrestler. So it's a kind of interesting fight, but I don't think it shows us anything about either fighter, because Allen is going to not do well necessarily against guys that he can't get to the ground and that crack harder than him, And Vittori's kind of not that, but is that. You know what I mean? Like, I think Vittori's a better wrestler, but doesn't crack harder than Allen. It doesn't crack that hard. But they both got good chins. So it's a weird fight to me. It's a weird fight. I see it going to a decision, but I don't know that Allen is going to be able to out-grapple Vittori, and I don't think that Vittori can out-grapple him, but he can out-wrestle him, rather. He can out-wrestle him. But I do think Allen's a better grappler, but if they're on their feet, I don't think Vittori puts him away. So it's just a fucking weird fight to me. And I don't know what you do with either one of those guys. Like, I mean, if Allen beats Vittori, yes, this is something where, he has to fight some other dude. But if Vittori beats Allen, I don't know what you do with Vittori. I don't think it's just a kind of weird fight to me. Oliver Ekman says, good, Fab. Got my second stripe tonight. Your advice to demand my stripe and call my coach a bitch worked. Andrew says, hey, Fab, always catching this live makes my day. I know you normally answer this question considering different perspectives you'll see as a fan, fight, as a manager, but how would you match make now? How would I match make who? Like these two guys that just fought, or like Strickland versus Duplessis? If I'm Duplessis' coach, I want Israel. That's going to be the biggest fight. That's going to be the biggest gate. That's going to be... I think Duplessis could probably beat Israel. You know what I mean? Just from his wrestling, his physicality and that. But having said that, I think Israel is... Don't get caught up one fight or whatever. I think Israel's still a fucking sniper with his striking, and he's definitely the cleaner striker of the two. But he's a fight to make. He's definitely the fight to make. And the Duplessis one, it's pretty easy. As a UFC, as a fan, and as a fighter, and a fighter's manager, whatever, it's Israel. That's the fight. Duplessis is an easy one. If I'm Strickland, as a fan, me, Fab, I want to see him fight Duplessis again. The UFC, I don't want to see Strickland fight. I've got to be very careful with Strickland, because you've got to ask yourself as a promotion, what is it that you want from this guy? Do you want him? Because this guy, Strickland, can beat anyone. He beat Adesanya, arguably beat Duplessis. So what do? Do you put him in against Hamza and he beats Hamza? And then what do you fucking do again? You got to give him another shot. And then you got this guy knocking out contenders, knocking off things. I don't know. This is a problem. Maybe give him Cannonier. I don't fucking know. Because if you don't want, and I'm talking about as a promotion, if I don't want him to be my champion, which I don't know that they would. I don't know. But if I don't want him to be my champion, then I'll probably give him Cannonier, because they can have a rematch, can be a title elimination or fucking whatever. But I don't. And if he beats Cannonier, all right, he beats one of the older guys on the roster, it's okay, But you give him someone else and he beats another young up-and-coming guy, all of a sudden you've devalued a prospect, and now you got Strickland again. You know what I mean? So this is a tough one. As his manager, I'll do everything I can to try and make it so that he fights Duplessis again. You know what I mean? Like anything you can. That's out of those two guys. If you're asking me, if you got any others that you're thinking of, please let me know, Andrew. Yeah, I just think they're the big things that you have to think about. But this one's a bit easier, because I do think that if I'm a fan of Strickland's, I want Duplessis again. If I'm his manager, I want Duplessis again. And if I'm the UFC, I'll probably give him Cannonier. I'll probably give him Cannonier or Dolitze. You know what I mean? Dolitze Imavov winner again. Like as in Imavov if he wins, or Dolitze if he wins, or Cannonier again. I don't think they want him champion. You know what I mean? And that's just me. I think if not, you're going to give him. If you give him Hamzat, he could beat Hamzat. You know what I mean? And now you got yourself another problem again. So I'd probably do that if I'm the UFC. Ofon says, I was wondering about DDP's cardio as well. Supposedly South Africa is at some sort of elevation when it comes to training. South Africa is at elevation. Maybe it's that. B. Johnson said, dead bang on, Fab, and it's freaking hard to get your gas back when you keep getting hit. Man, honestly, people do not fucking understand this. Like credit to Sean for landing the jabs, but when the third round came and I saw how many shots DDP had taken, and when you look at the stats, we've been through the stats, you've seen the stats. When you understand how many times this guy got fucking jabbed flush in the face with 4-round gloves, I thought this is it. He's not going on 4th and 5th round. Like, that's how I felt the fight was going. I don't know what he does for his gas tank. I don't know what he does for that incredible physicality that he has, you know. But if you understand if you understand the damage that does, like, people don't fucking get it. It doesn't look like much. You cannot get your rhythm going, and physiologically your neural system fatigues, your cardiovascular system fatigues, and then your confidence and everything starts to get shit because you can't get through this guy's range. This guy's just picking you off. It's very, very daunting, you know, and how he overcomes that physically and psychologically. Well, physically, number one, is incredible. Oliver Ekman says the only time seeing harder looking punches was Fab VR boxing. B. Johnson says Prime Yoel Romero could go toe to toe with Dricus, I bet. Yeah, but that's another animal, just on physicality and the rest of it. Not many people, like if Yoel Romero had been like won the Sydney Olympics at 22, 23, and Yoel Romero had switched over to MMA there, and then at 27, 28, 29, around that time, if he had spent 5 years in MMA properly after the Sydney Olympics, no one would have beat him, I don't think. Ophon says this fight was hard to score live. Even watching in slow motion after the fact with accurate analysis, it's still difficult to qualify who wins on damage in some cases. It would maybe be an idea to at least experiment with 5 judges. Yeah, I just think that it usually just makes it harder. The more people you have involved, the harder it is. Like, you're just going to have 5 separate opinions other than 3. Charles says, cheers, Fab. In your opinion, what's a proper evaluation of defense in the context of combat sports? Is there a level of defensive success that could ever count as much as a landed strike? In boxing, I do believe that defense is a criteria, you know. And when you swing and miss and hit air, it actually gasses you more than if you hit the guy or hit thing. It's not the same. If you don't believe this, go hit a bag for 30 seconds, right? Hit it pretty hard. That will gas you, yes. But swing for the fences and hit nothing but air, and you're going to fucking gas at least as bad. I think you're going to gas more. So I think it's hard to value defense, though, as a quantitative measure, because you can't ever have defense as high as attack, because it's easier to destroy than to create, you know. So to create an offense and to set traps and to set things, like, it's really hard. So you have to credit that over defense every single time, you know what I mean? Because with the defense, you're only ever a chink away from getting knocked out, and defense is only going to be accurate in a mano a mano sport if you can counter attack, which is still going to be your attack. So yeah, but in Sean's case, it wasn't like he was just doing the Philly shell and not hitting back. Like, that's one of the criticisms like Pernell Whitaker would get, saying, oh, he didn't hit that hard, or, you know, he just dodged. No, but he got out of the way with his defense, and his defense made people look fucking stupid. And then he would crack you. If you don't know who he is, look him up. Pernell Sweet Pea Whitaker. Like, the guy was like a fucking freak of nature. May he rest in peace. One of the best boxers to ever do it. Steve Riley says, g'day, Coach Fab. Strickland versus Whitaker is all I want. Sean has been firing shots at the Reaper, and I feel it's time for Rob to get real hungry. Costa shouldn't be anywhere near a fight with Rob. I mean, Strickland and Rob would be an interesting fight. It's definitely a clash of styles. Yeah, I think it would be a fantastic fight. I don't think Costa beats Rob. I don't think he does. We'll see what happens. SG says, I would probably start crying after the first jab. Man, the jabs hurt, man. They fucking hurt so bad. So do body shots and so do leg kicks. Don't get me wrong. Andrew says, yeah, I just meant for the main event. Thank you so much. No, thank you, sir. Thank you very much for supporting. Guys, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe and support the channel. SG says, was incredible to see a fight in person. People don't realize the camera's frame rate doesn't do Strickland speed justice. The jabs looked like blurs. Thank you. Thank you, mate. So you watched the fight live. You were there in the arena. And that's one of the things that people don't understand about watching a fight live. Like when you see a dude fire off a jab and you barely see the jab and you just see the guy's head snap back and you hear the poof, or the snap, or the pop or the clap of the stiff jab to the face, you're like, fuck, you know what I mean? Like you really, it's a different thing. So it's a completely different thing when you're watching a fight live and you're watching it live in person. I'm talking about the way that those shots land is different, dude. It's a different thing. It's a different animal. And it's not, that's why watching it live on TV is one thing. But that's already removed. Watching it not live on TV, already knowing the result. That's removed so far from watching it live in person right next to him and seeing the jab land, you know what I mean? And watching the guy's reaction to the jab, live in the arena, it's different. SG says there was one kick DDP threw to the body that shook the arena. Yeah, these are things that you can't appreciate. That's why I can't say to you, the judges know nothing, because I wasn't there and I wasn't judging. This is another thing. Watching a fight live, even if you're watching it live and you're sitting next to the judge, you're not judging the fight. Do you get what I mean? If you're judging the fight, it's different. You know what I mean? It's different. You can say, I've watched thousands of fights. No one's arguing that with you, dude. But unless you're the one judging it, you're not judging it. And so you don't have the benefit of storing the fucking rounds in your head and kind of changing it as they go, because that's not the criteria of scoring. So they have to go to that criteria. So it's a lot of things people don't understand. SG says Allen and Evloev are way more shredded in person. They look pretty shredded on camera. The other thing, even with stuff like that, you don't realize how big or how small or how athletic some of these guys are. Like, obviously, I've coached top-end guys, and when I remember before people saying to me, oh, Israel's a small guy for the middleweight division, as he should be fighting. Well, like, dude, Israel's a fucking big athletic dude, man. Like, I'm just on 6 foot, and when I met him, shook his hands are like fucking dinner plates, like a bunch of bananas. And you look up at him and you're like, holy fuck, this guy's like tall. Like, I have to look up at him, and he's broad and he's a big, thick, like his thighs and that are big, you know what I mean? He's a broad dude, long arms, like it's a big dude, man. And then even the way people look live is not necessarily like, there are guys that they don't seem that big until you roll with them. And then you roll with them and you realize, like, the way the weight's distributed, like they might have a big bum and a fucking big thick core, and you go, that's fucking why, like, you can't move them, you know what I mean? Like, they're built like a duck. So there's all different builds in that. You can't tell until you're in there with them. So SG saying DDP is freaking massive in person as well. You know who's big in person is Strickland. Strickland's also big. He's just built different to a lot of people. Like, he's a big boy as well. Like, you can't, it's not the way people look like. Also, DDP's very muscular. He's like, looks like he could be a bodybuilder. And he's also very broad and barrel chested. You know what I mean? He's got like a big V in his back. So it makes him look even bigger than what he is. He's already a big guy. And Sean just doesn't have that like big athletic look, but he's obviously a big dude, you know what I mean? And the way that, like, he can read the fight and his vision, it's phenomenal. SG says Strickland is quite big as well, but DDP looked like a light heavyweight next to Sean. Yeah, but see, for me, I've never seen DDP in person, but I have seen Sean in person, and he threw me off how big he was as well. Like, I didn't think he was as big as I thought he'd be, And then people are different. Like, the bones are different. The way some people don't look that big, but they're still very heavy because they've got very thick bones. It's a big thing, when you're watching like rugby league or rugby or something like that, and you look at guys and they weigh the same, but they play different positions. And one guy can take hits, but if you looked at them, you wouldn't know this. One guy can take hits, but the other guy can't take the same hits, but he's very versatile with his footwork. But you can't tell that by looking at him. SG says, just remember to ask this. These guys look like bodybuilders. Do they lift weights to get that kind of physique? Some of them will lift weights. Like they all lift weights to some degree, but a lot of that look is genetics. It's like the way, doesn't mean you're strong or anything. It just, a lot of that's genetics. Just the way that your physique's made. But they'd all lift weights to some degree, to doing, and lifting weights is not, how could I say, better than saying lifting weights. All of them would do some type of resistance training rather than me saying they lift weights. SG says, I know pro bodybuilders that have been lifting weights for years that look smaller than them. Yeah, but you're talking about like, if you say Romero, for instance, the best example of it, with a guy like Romero, you're talking about a guy that first is a genetic fucking freak, silver medalist at the Olympics in 2000. He medaled at every major competition for 10 years straight. This is a freak of nature athlete. And then you're looking at the fact that he's done a sport that is resistance based in wrestling and then MMA. And then he's obviously done resistance training, whether it's push-ups, sit-ups, fucking whatever, if you really believe just that's all he's done. But which there's footage of him lifting weights and doing Olympic lifting and whatnot and lifting a shit ton of weights. There's footage of it, so I'm not going to get into the discussion. These guys are just freaks in nature. Plus, you're talking about middleweights. You know what I mean? So these guys are 84, 85 kilos in the ring, but they're all like in season, like not in season, but out of the ring. They're all 94 plus, 93, 94, 95 kilograms plus. And every single one of them, right? All of them. And if you just left them to their own devices and said, you're not fighting anymore, but go and lift weights, all of them would be over 100 kilos. Every single fucking one of them would be easily over 100 kilos. That is already a big guy. And then you tell them to do a bodybuilding regime, they'd all be 115 kilos lean. Easy, without even trying. They're big guys. These guys are really, really big guys. SG says, I imagine Rob is big in person. I wouldn't talk about anyone that I've worked with, their weight or anything. That's not for me to say. But yeah, he's like a big dude, but in a different way. Like I said, like some people have big bum and big core, like thick core. And it's only until you grab him that you go, holy fuck, this person's a big dude. He's not like there's another kid that trains with me, not a kid, he's 31 years old. He'll be going to Abu Dhabi trials, the ADCC trials. He trains with me now, Blake Barton. And he's got a similar build. Like you look at him and yeah, he looks fit and strong. Like he's probably 80 kilos, 77, 80, between there, 77 to 81 kilos. He floats in and out of there. But when he grabs you, you go, holy shit, this dude is special strong, and you don't see it, but he's got a big bum, thick core, he's able to generate a lot of power, a lot of strength. And then it's also the muscle fiber types that you have. Your insertion points of your tendons are going to have an effect on your muscle angle as well, which is going to determine how strong you're going to be in certain positions. So all of those things are more important than just your actual size, SG says, man, Pereira is freaking massive. Yeah, he's a big man. I've met him in real life, like I've seen him in real life, and he's huge. SG says he was walking around Toronto like a freaking titan. Yeah, he's a huge, huge man. But again, there's a difference between him and a natural heavyweight. There's a big difference between those two things. He's a big guy, but a natural heavyweight is really, really huge human being. And so yeah, it's just a fucking interesting thing. But like I said, a lot of the genetics and a lot of the physicality stuff are things you can't see. It's how you're wired, your insertion points, your muscle fibers, your fucking ability to recruit the muscle fibers, so many things, your proprioception, all of these things. You can't see it necessarily, but it's there. Guys, I have to go because I have to go coach. Guys, thank you so much. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Please hit the notification bell and let us know any questions, anything. If there are shorts of this that you'd like done, please let me know in the comments below. Let me know who you think won the fight and why. And guys, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for the support. I will catch you guys soon. Take care.